Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. And today I'd like to talk to you about one specific book, and that is The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. This is part of my Reading the French Classics challenge here that I'm doing here on YouTube, and there's so much to talk about. So let's get right to it. So first of all, I had never seen any of the movies, the musical, nothing like that, but I knew the basic outline of the story of The Phantom of the Opera because it's been such a big part of popular culture. So for anybody that doesn't know it, the story is basically of this like ghost in that it has been like haunting an opera house, and he falls in love with one of the singers, one of the actresses in the opera, and he is helping her, and he's always in the background. In the meantime, the actress falls in love with somebody else, and there's tension, and the ghost is like haunting them and trying to manipulate the woman. And that's exactly what you get here. It's exactly what you get. That's the basic story of The Phantom of the Opera, the book. Having not seen the musical or the movie, I don't know how true to the book any of those are, but I will be trying to get my hands on both of those, both the musical and the movie adaptation of it. But let's talk about a few themes in the book. So one is the narrative. It was actually published in installments. So like every week you would get like, you know, a piece of the story, and so people were following along that way. And the story is told like from a historian's perspective, right? At the beginning, you get like a note from the author talking about how these are real events and how he has pieced together source material from these different sources, blah, blah, blah. That's just kind of the narrative style. And from time to time, you hear the author's voice, the historian, as like the narrator of the story throughout. Mostly though, the historian stays out of it. And instead you get the story told from a couple of different perspectives. I'll get to that. One of the main themes in here that jumped out to me was that of class. And I think that the author wasn't trying to emphasize it, but it jumped out at me a lot because Christine, who is the female heroine of the story, is she's an opera singer, so she's not an upper class woman, not a middle class woman, and she's kind of, you know, of this like lower class. And she has fallen in love, and the love is reciprocated by an aristocrat, Leroux. And one of the reasons why they hadn't gotten together before she becomes, you know, this opera darling was because of the class differences. Like, hey, as an aristocrat cannot just marry some opera singer, and you know, so she has to go off and do other things. And then they come back together now that she's becoming a darling of the opera house. And I felt like parts of the story brush over the class difference. I'm like, it's not just the ghost preventing them from being together, it's the class issue. Is he just gonna ignore the class issue because it was a huge problem before, and now somehow he doesn't mind that? I don't think so. Anywho, that was just something that I kept seeing as a theme that was clearly there, but was ignored by the story at times, right? So the other issue that jumped out at me was that of race. The last chunk of the story is told through the viewpoint of a character that we get to know as the Persian, right? Because he's from Persia, and he is, very interestingly, the only character whose actions and choices made sense to me in the story. Like everybody else is batshit to me. Like, what kind of ridiculous choices are y'all making? and Christine and Leroux read so young to me. I think they're supposed to be like in the early 20s, but they read to me like total like immature teenagers. Like, I felt like in a lot of ways they feel like they're Romeo and Juliet, and I'm like, you're just replicating some of the absurdness of Romeo and Juliet. Stop it. but the Persians choices and stories make sense. He's mature. He kind of sees the big picture, sees the motivations and the true character of the different people involved in here. and yet he's not really given credit for that. In some ways, the author does give him credit for that because so much of the end of the narration is seen through his eyes, right? The fact that he made this character, you know, non-white is significant, but then there's elements of like racist language that pops here and there into some of that narrative, the way people talk about the person and react to him, and which was, you know, typical of the time, but kind of, you know, I had to roll my eyes at some of those things. Fortunately, they are not central, and there's just a few of them, so that I was able to kind of keep going with the story without like wanting to throw the book at the wall, right? So the thing that will jump out to everyone reading this book is how dramatic the story is. Like, if you want drama, if you like soap operas, there's plenty of that here, and it is an action-packed book. There's very few like lulls in the story because so much is like really dramatic, and like people are feeling their emotions, and every little thing is like a big deal. and that was some of the ridiculousness of it that I also kind of enjoyed, because I've been known to enjoy a dramatic soap opera here and there, and so I was okay with that. But if you don't like that, then this will not be the book for you, because there's so much of that kind of drama in here. Like, you know, people not having frank discussions with one another, not communicating, secrets being kept, ghosts flying around, and you're just like, could you all behave like adults, please? Because I would like literally solve this whole thing. If you just behaved like adults, your problems would be minuscule, but instead you're acting like, you know, whiny children, and now everything's a big deal. So there you go. Another theme here is that of gender, right? There's a lot of discussions of Christine's honor, because she's spending a lot of time with this ghost, right? And Leroux worries about, like, wait a minute, you're meeting with him, just him, in private? And he like flat out asks her if she's still a good girl, basically, and she's all like indignant about it, because she is. And so a lot of, you know, a lot is made out of like the fact that she, you know, does not have a sexual relationship with the Phantom of the Opera, and while he obviously has romantic feelings for her, that her feelings are not the same, right? There's also a lot of the drama revolves around who she will marry, her making a choice, and at the same time, when we're looking at the choices she's making, what she's doing, like, it wasn't clear to me that she, one, wants to be married, or two, like, really loves either one of these guys. We are told she's in love with one of them. They both believe she's in love with them. But is she really in love? I did not see any evidence of her being in love with any of these men. They want her to be, but her actions don't reflect that. Just putting it out there. So that, you know, the story doesn't give her a choice, right? Like, the choice is pick one or the other. And I'm like, so it's just a default. She's going to get married. What if she doesn't really want to? Anyways, reflective of the time, but still one of those, you know, annoying themes in the story. The other big theme for me as a historian, and why I wanted to read The Phantom of the Opera to begin with, is the setting. So the story is set in like 1870s Paris, in an opera house. Most of it is taking place in an opera house. So that is modeled after an actual opera house in Paris, the Opéra Garnier, which is one of the two big opera houses in Paris that I have attended. I will actually try to show you all pictures of when I was there. This is after the Second Empire, right? And after the Paris Commune, and I think it's supposed to be like at the beginning of the Republic. So what the history that is implied here, and that the book doesn't really delve into until, in this edition at least, there's a few chapters at the end that tell you about the history of the Opéra Garnier, is that it was commissioned during the Second Empire of Louis Napoleon, which is Napoleon Bonaparte's nephew. And during the reign of Louis Napoleon, there is a total, like, central Paris is basically bulldozed and rebuilt from the ground up. This is there are major consequences to this rebuilding of Paris. One, the working class poor people that lived in central Paris are all thrown out. Like, they're literally just thrown out of their homes, and everything is destroyed. And in its place, we get the Paris that we know today, with the huge boulevards, with the department stores, with the opera houses, with all of the, like, high class fancy stuff that is still located in central Paris. It means then that the center of the city becomes a wealthy center for wealthy people, and the outskirts of the town end up becoming the poor areas where the poor migrate to, and that is still the case today. And that follows a different pattern than the kind of urbanization pattern that we see in the United States, where kind of the urban center was the poor center, right, where we saw where poor working classes live, and then the suburbs become kind of more for the wealthier middle class people. And so this was through a process of Haussmanization that happened in Paris. So it's the reason we have the Paris we see today, and where, like, you see heavy class influences. Now, that's not happening in the story. This is all kind of the historical background of it, but I think it's important to understanding kind of some of the dynamics and how important the building, like the character of the opera house itself is, because it really is a character in the story. For chunks of the story, we're taken through the different, like, hallways and trapdoors and everything that is happening inside the building and below the building, because it's alive, and you can really see how architecture comes to life, and how humans give it life in this story. So I think if you're into architecture and, like, the beauty of it, you see quite a bit of that here, and also the world of the opera house, right? I was never into theater or any of that, but I think that there would be a strong resonance for those of you that have throughout the story, because there's a lot of, like, even, like, drama amongst the cast of the opera and all of this. But yeah, I really enjoyed reading The Phantom of the Opera. It's pretty fast-paced, as I said, although there are some lulls. A lot of it, I think, is because of the language, because it's written in a different time period. Some of the language gets into some lulls, but like I said, also action-packed, so there's enough there to keep people interested. If you've had it on your TBR at all, I highly recommend picking it up and then telling me what you think. If you've already read it, please let me know what you think, and we can have a chat about it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!